tell us, you know, a quick story about the Union Cemetery and you going out there. Were you just, I think you were a little bit naive as to what was going to happen. Just kind of
Right.
talk about that and your
Well,
experiences.
when I was college age, though, I saw the Warrens a couple times on their lecture circuit, and they put on a great show, and we were terrified. But one of the stories they used to tell was there's a white lady that roams Union Cemetery, and they showed us a lot of pictures of this, the what do you call it, like the spirit energy pictures, and some that looked actually like figures. And like I said, going back to my brown lady Raynham Hall, I said maybe this is my opportunity to go get this cool picture I always wanted to have. So I eventually learned where this place was, and when I went there the first night, I really believed in my head that that she walks around and you could just take her picture. That's what I thought. I said, you just have to catch a glimpse of her. So I remember it was like winter, and it was cold, and I had the old fashioned camera with film in it, and I waited like over an hour, and there was no ghost, no white lady. I was disappointed, and I said, let me just take my roll of film to prove that I was here as a souvenir, and then I probably never went back again. But when I got my pictures developed, I got some curious things on the film. Um, Not saying there were ghosts, but there weren't orbs, but there was some kind of that energy stuff that people see. And I said it's kind of interesting. So I went repeatedly, and not sometimes I go and get nothing, but I collected enough pictures over probably the next almost a year that I had a whole album full of these pictures. And if one wasn't dramatic enough, and I hate myself for this now, I used to throw them out if they weren't dramatic enough. But I have had a whole album of these pictures. So one day I was up there, and I met a lady, Debbie, that was also taking pictures. And she said, "Hey, what do you got there?" And I said, "Oh, it's an album full of these pictures I took." And she said, "Oh, I work with Ed and Lorraine Warren. I said, I'd love to see these." So she says, "We have meetings on Mondays." And she goes, "Maybe you could bring them and show them to them." So the next Monday, on the way up there, I went up there with my friend Rick, and he was telling me the whole way up. He goes, "Jim, don't let them take your pictures because they're valuable." Back then, we thought they'd be like worth $1 million. And I goes, "Don't let her take your pictures." I go, "No, no, no, they're mine." So as soon as we got there, Ed and Lorraine are looking at them, and especially Lorraine's like, "Oh my God, honey, these are excellent pictures. Can we have them?" "Yeah, here, take them." And I gave them all my pictures, and they still use some of them in their show when they did use them in their shows. Um, and then I became part of their team, and that was like 1990, 91, somewhere in there. And I became like, we all had title. Like I was telling you before, I don't like the title thing,
Yeah.
but I was titled the psychic photographer of the group. I used to, that was my job when we went to a location. I would go through the place taking pictures, mostly inside and outside, and
Just
like a
still pictures,
videographer.
not video.
Still and video, yeah. I was one of back then. It was funny because we all didn't have the equipment they have now. So I had a camcorder, so I was one of the only people that had one. So I became like the videographer and photographer, and that was my primary job. And then then you got to interviewing afterwards and uh,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I know you could probably speak on hours on that. Talk about the Warrens and who they were, what kind of people they were, and um, do you, I think people always respect you more after you pass away. Unfortunately, do you think how were they perceived by others throughout not just Connecticut, but around the United States and the world?
Well, that's funny. I got a funny story about that. When I was involved with them, they weren't who they are now. They were a big name in the area, but I only knew them from the college kids all knew who they were, and they would sell out everywhere they went. But they weren't looked at like they are now, because I remember when we go to investigate a house or something, we get back 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and there was a diner that we'd go to. It was like a custom. Like after the case, we'd go to this diner, and the the locals knew who they were, so they'd all look at us, be whispering, behind their backs, like saying, "Look at these weirdos." And like that's funny because now they'd be asking for their autographs.
Talk about some of the I guess where they're buried now, they did a majority of their exorcisms in that church. Talk about
Yep.
some stuff that you witnessed and filmed with your own eyes.
Well, they're Ed and Lorraine are both buried in Stepney Cemetery, which was a place that we investigated with them a lot. Like I have pictures of them inside the cemetery investigating the place. Sightings even did an episode called "The Lady in White" that focused on Union Cemetery and Stepney Cemetery. Neighboring Stepney Cemetery is Our Lady of the Rosary Chapel, where we did the majority of our exorcisms at that church. So that whole church has a quite a history. Stepney Cemetery also is a cemetery that it's about 5 miles away from Union, and some people believe that it's the same entity that's seen at both cemeteries, which I don't think that really makes sense, but a lot of people think that. But this is also another cemetery where you get crazy pictures at. And there's also if you want, there's a guy, a friend of mine named Glenn Pinnell, who I think in 1991 he was a firefighter, and he got a call. There was 3 transformers on fire in front of the cemetery.
Which
and
cemetery?
This is Stepney Cemetery. There was 3 transformers on fire, blowing smoke into the sky, blowing energy, whatever it is. And he was with a police officer at the time having dinner. He got the call, so he was the first person on the scene. And there's this little side road next to Stepney called Pepper Road, right next to the church. And he said he was with his he was in his pickup truck, and he was going slowly, looking back and forth, trying to find a spot to park and block traffic at the same time. So as he's looking back and forth, the police officer says, "Watch out, you're going to hit that lady." And he looks up, and there's this woman in white, he says, right in front of his truck. He said he couldn't put the brakes on fast enough. He struck her. She went over the hood into the windshield and then fell back to the ground. So he immediately got out of the truck, and he said there was no body, there's no blood, there's no clothing, nothing. And he said thousands of dollars worth of damage to his front of his big pickup truck. And then even somebody in back of them said, "You just hit that woman."
So he and the police officer felt like it was a physical woman that went over the hood and into his thing, and no one was there.
Yeah, she was solid enough that he hit her and did damage to his truck. And also I remember he said he called local hospitals, he called local police departments saying, "Is there a Jane Doe at a hospital?" Or he says, "I don't know." He felt this was a person. And some people believe that the energy spewing from the transformers that were on fire was enough energy to help her manifest into a solid,
Wow.